I keep telling Edward, that's my husband, that he really should learn to speak Italian. We often slip away to our favourite little hidey-hole in Italy for a break from the simply ghastly weather here, and it's marvellous to be able to really communicate with the natives. They're really terribly friendly over there and so pleased when one makes the effort to talk their language. Very endearing. I asked Julia, whose husband is a rather clever civil servant and almost in the diplomatic service, where the best place was to learn Italian. She said, in that rather affected way of hers, "My dear, l'Istituto Italiano di Cultura in Fitzwilliam Square, of course." So, having pretended I'd already thought of that one, I was wondering if there were anywhere more classy. The Italian Embassy, or something like that. I enrolled for the intermediate class. I thought it more sensible not to start at the very bottom with too many eager beavers with no idea whatsoever of their own language, let alone anyone else's. I feel it's important to be among equals when one is making a foray into the unknown. So far, really. I reckoned that in the second year, the dross would be weeded out and people would have found their appropriate level. I'm sure you know what I mean. People with a feeling for culture and art and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, there I was on the first morning, full of enthusiasm, pigskin attaché case in one hand, Mont Blanc fountain pen in the other. I sat right at the front, little to the left, so I could get to the loo and the coffee machine without any difficulty. Then this positively dishy Italian materialises on the platform thingy in front of me and launches off into about a dozen sentences in Italian. I thought he was basically saying hello and welcome. It took him forever, but you know how excitable and long-winded they can be. I found out later that he did say hello and welcome, but he also said that he'd had a marvellous time in Sicily in the summer with his family, that the sun never stopped shining, that he hadn't missed the Irish climate one bit. And then, apparently, he asked people to talk about their summer holidays. As I was sitting up at the front, right under his gorgeous Roman nose, he smiled down at me and said something, and then stopped and looked at me. This I found a teensy bit unnerving. The man was obviously waiting for an answer. I had no idea what he'd asked. I mean, he spoke so quickly. I know it was the intermediate course, but there was absolutely no need to rush things. I took a very deep breath, gave him my most engaging smile, and came out with a very credible "Buongiorno, maestro." I thought the maestro bit was a touch of genius. Italian men are incredibly vain. He gave me a lovely smile, and then said something else I couldn't quite catch, and then he waited again. This was becoming just a little tedious, so I trawled around in my mind for any useful phrases I had gleaned from my Parliamo Italiano phrasebook. I remembered near the beginning there was a section on asking people how they were, to show how interested you were in them. So I said, "Come sta? Quanto bello giorno, da dove viene lei?" Pretty terrific stuff, really, considering I'd only bought the book 4 days earlier. I mean, I'd asked him how he was. Wasn't it a super day? and finished by inquiring about his origins. I thought one of the three might have been covered by his question to me. Apparently not. I was demoted to the beginners class. He said it was better to go slowly. Più lento con pazienza, he said. Well, I'm not a lento sort of person. No. I'm an allegro con brio kind of woman. But he didn't give me time to explain that. I didn't want to go along with the idea of joining the beginners, especially when I found out that their class was conducted by a rather fierce-looking female with a moustache and a bun. No, I'd go it alone, I decided. So I bought a tape and another bigger book and settled down with them after breakfast each morning when Edward had gone to the office. I soon got the measure of it. It's basically a very simple language, really, when you remember it's just Latin with frills. Of course, I'd done a year's Latin at school before they switched me to needlework. I was soon buongiornoing the milkman and the postman like mad. I think they thought it was great fun. Although, I must admit, the window cleaner looked a little startled, wobbled a bit on his ladder when I remarked it was una bella giornata. Poor chap's probably never been abroad. But the other two couldn't stop smiling every time I greeted them. Tradesmen can be really very sweet when you give them the chance, can't they? Then I discovered this gem of a delicatessen run by an Italian family not far from Brown Thomas. I made up my mind that not one word of English would pass my lips when I was in that shop. And even if I couldn't manage to say everything I wanted, I would soldier on until I made them realise what I meant. The first encounter went really quite well, all things considered, except for the fact that they would keep talking back to me in English. No, no, I said, waving my hands around like they do. Parliamo Italiano solo. It took quite an effort on my part to make them realise I was deadly serious. But they eventually got the hang of things and joined in with molto gusto. Although, do you find that foreigners tend to sort of gallop when they speak their own language? It's really not necessary, is it? I mean, we don't, do we? I have to say, Edward has been rather disappointingly unenthusiastic about my adventures in Italian. He says I shouldn't bother to try and speak it except on holiday. Personally, I think that's taking a rather limp attitude to life. I know he's got a bit fed up with asti spumante and prosciutto e melone for starters, and having to finish each meal with rather funny-looking round cheese that is kept in water and tastes, I must admit, a little like plastic. But I wasn't prepared to point in the shop at the things I wanted. The menu will grow as my knowledge increases. Anyway, as I keep telling the silly man, you have to be prepared to suffer for culture. Don't you agree?